Well, this last piece that we're going to look at involves yet another unusual technique, playing three basses pretty much simultaneously. Now, this piece really came about because of my three instruments primarily. As I mentioned before, each of them is a little bit different and they're all have their kind of strengths and weaknesses. So I spend a lot of time kind of switching back and forth between them. You know, I'll play the fretted bass for a while if I want to do something kind of percussive, and then switch over to the fretless bass if I want to do something more melodic. Well, several years ago, it occurred to me that by using the tapping technique, I could probably actually play on two instruments simultaneously because, you know, I have two hands and it only takes one hand to tap. So this idea seemed kind of silly at first, but then I started thinking about all the things I could do compositionally with that idea, and that's what really got me interested in it, because I figured I could use two different tunings and I could work with moving some of the thematic motives between the two basses. And there's certain kinds of polyrhythms and cross rhythms that I really couldn't do just on one bass, that I could only really do on more than one bass. So at that time, I started working on a piece for the fretted bass and the hyper bass together. Now my fretted bass is pretty small, so I figured that I could strap it on. If I lengthened the strap, it would hang pretty low, and I could kind of shorten the strap on the hyper bass and hang it above, and pretty comfortably tap on both of those two basses at the same time. So I wrote the piece Watson and Crick just like that and started playing it around. But of course, you know, it wasn't long before people were asking me when I was going to play three basses at the same time. So I finally caved in and decided to give that compositional challenge a try. And I'm glad I did, because there are a lot of fun things that can be done on three basses that just can't be done on one. So let me show you how to set up for this piece. So let's start with the fretless bass. I knew from playing Watson and Crick that I could strap on the hyper bass and the fretted bass at the same time. So the challenge for me was to figure out what to do with the fretless bass, how to get that one into the mix. I considered strapping all three on, but that seemed a little ridiculous for the back and also seemed a little awkward. So I came up with the idea of putting the fretless bass on a high table, and that way I can kind of tap on it with my right hand. Now today, Laurel has been kind enough to offer to hold it for me, and often when I'm playing live, I'll get a volunteer from the audience to do this job, but it works just as well. Of course, when you're practicing at home, if you don't have somebody as patient as Laurel, then you'll have to find a high table. Sometimes you can put a box on top of a table and put a bass on top of it like that. Now the tuning for the fretless bass for this piece, again, these are the more regular gauge strings, so we'll reference from standard tuning. Take your E string, tune it down a major third to C. Then your A string, tune it down a whole step to G. Leave your D string at D. And tune the G string up a whole step to A. So this tuning is C, G, D, A, low to high, and it's the same tuning as a cello, only this is an octave lower. So this is how it looks to have the hyper bass and the fretted bass strapped on simultaneously. What I've done is taken the strap on the fretted bass and pulled it way out to sort of punk rock level, and then taken the strap on the hyper bass and really shortened that and put the hyper bass on just sort of right on over top of the fretted bass. Now if you're real sensitive about the finish of your instrument, you might want to put some tape or something on the back of these, because they do kind of tend to rub against each other. Okay, now the tunings for these two basses are going to be two different other tunings. We'll start with the fretted bass. This bass also has more regular gauge strings on it, so we'll again reference from standard tuning. Take your E string and tune it down a whole step to D. Then your A string, tune that down a whole step also, down to G. We're going to leave your D and G strings at their regular pitches. So the final tuning for the fretted bass on this tune, D, G, then up an octave, D, G. Okay, now the hyper bass. The low string on the hyper bass is going to be tuned to G. This is the G, a minor third above standard open low E. Then the next string, G an octave above that. Then the next string is at A, which is a whole step above the previous string. And the high string is tuned to D, which is a fourth above the previous string. Now for this piece, we're also going to use the extender key on the low string. We're going to use the extender key to tune that string down a whole step, down from G to F. Okay, so now we're ready to play My Three Moons.